Hi, they're saying I'm having problems, but I don't see any problems. They're always trying things more difficult than they have to be. Have you noticed that? Okay, very good.
That's called technology.
Welcome back to Global Media Network LLC. Our Passionate World Talk Radio is a wholly owned subsidiary of GMN LLC. Our motto is and always will be educate, enlighten, and entertain. And since in the summer, certain hosts are taking vacation, and today we're making up because tomorrow Betsy Worcel will be out. So it's Lisa Skinner and I, Lillian Caldwell, who will be doing Lest We Forget. And today, Lisa is going to be talking about the LGBT, which means, for those who don't know, lesbians. G is for gay. B is bisexual. And the last one is transgender. But it saves you all those syllables when you just say LGBT. So next time somebody comes up, or they ask you that question on Trivial Pursuit, you'll know what it means. And now to Lisa Skinner.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us again today for another special episode of Lest We Forget. Now, if you were watching last week, we started our new series on transgenderism in the United States and the controversy that it's causing, especially because it is so widely trending in the media. So this week, I wanted to present to you the continuation of that series with the survey that I presented to you last episode, done by the Pew Research Center. And what they did as part of this survey was they posed a question to the general public. The question is, why do some people think views on issues related to transgender people and those who do not identify as a man or a woman are changing too quickly? And these are the responses that the survey was given in their own words. And they actually cover multiple topics or subjects. So the first one that I want to read to you are the general concerns about the pace of change. And as I'm going through this, think about how you would have responded if you had been part of this Pew Research Center. We would really love to hear your thoughts about this. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Lillian will. So, general concerns about the pace of change. One person responded, "The issue is so new to me, I can't keep up. I don't know what to think about all of this new information, and I'm baffled by so many changes." Another person says, "It takes quite a bit of time for society to accept changes. I have not been aware of this issue for very long. I am relatively conservative and feel that changes need time to be accepted." So those were two of the responses that were published in this article regarding general concerns. The next category are for religious reasons. One person said, they responded by saying, "People now believe everyone should just forget about their birth identity and just go along with whatever they think they are. God made us all for a reason. And if he intended us to pick our gender then there would be no reason to be born with specific male or female parts." Another person, "I have a personal religious belief that sex is an essential part of our eternal identity and that identifying as someone other than you are just does not make a lot of sense. And then the third response that was published goes on to say, I believe God created a man and a woman. We have overstepped our bounds in messing with the miracle of life. I side with my creator. These were 3 responses given in the religious reasons for the responses. The next category are concerns about long-term medical consequences. First response says, we do not know the long-term health problems of hormone therapy, especially in young children. 2, more time needs to pass to study mental, physical, emotional ramifications of medications and surgeries, especially when done before puberty and or adulthood. And then lastly, accepting gender fluidity, especially for younger children, seems quick. Also, medical treatments related to gender for people under 18 seems to be accepted without longer-term studies. And as you can hear, I am not interjecting any personal comments or responses to any of these, because I want to be neutral and just share with you what was published in this study done by the Pew Research Center when they surveyed the general public. And these are just examples of some of the responses they got. I think they just, really condensed it. But anyway, continuing on, this is the next category. It's a fad driven by media. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I respect people's views about themselves, and I will refer to them in the way they want to be referred to. But I believe it's become trendy because it's being pushed so much in culture, especially for children. The next response. News media, social media, and entertainment media companies are trying to change, and it seems they have been succeeding in changing public opinion on the issue for many people. And then the third response is, it is encouraging kids who are easily influenced to participate in the fad, quote unquote, when their brains are not even fully developed. Okay, next category, concerns about school. First response, elementary school students should not be subjected to instruction on sex identity. Any questions the child asks should be referred to a parent. Next response, I think that young people are exposed to these issues at too early of an age. I believe that is up to the parents, and I oppose schools that want to include it in their curriculum. And then the last response about schools, it's being pushed on society, and especially on younger children, confusing them all the more. This is not something that should be taught in schools. I'm going to pause for 1 second, because I just want to bring to everybody's attention, and I have no doubt you've noticed it too. The major theme in most of these responses is in regard to younger children. So that is definitely a major concern for probably the majority of the people out there. I know it's a concern for me. I am going to say that that is my personal belief, but that's a consistent response in what I've read to you so far. So this is the second question that they asked the general public, and to please respond in their own words. So the question was, why do some people think views on issues related to transgender people and those who don't identify as a man or a woman are changing too slowly? So on the subject of discrimination, one of the responses is as follows. There are far too much discrimination. There is far too much discrimination, hate, and violence directed toward people who are brave enough to stand up for who they truly are. We as a country and as a society need to respect how people want to identify themselves and be kind toward one another. End of story. The second response, protections for basic rights to self-determination in identity, healthcare choices, privacy, and consensual relationships should be a bare minimum that our society can provide for everyone, transgender people included. Number 3, there is too much discrimination. People need to quit controlling other people's private lives. I consider them very brave for having the courage to be who they identify with. And the last response in that category is, equal protection has not kept up with trans issues. I have to say that we talked about that last week, including trans youth and the right to gender affirming care. Okay, that same question now in the category of legislative efforts. And the first response is, acceptance is not changing quickly enough. There remains discrimination, and elected officials are passing laws that make it more difficult for transgender individuals in society to live, work, and exist. Number 2, we are going backwards, and with all the anti-gay and trans legislation that is being passed. Number 3, for every step forward, it feels like there are 2 steps back with reactive conservative laws. And number 4, these laws are working to restrict the rights of trans and non-binary people. And also discrimination is still very high, which results in elevated rates of suicide, poverty, violence, and homelessness, especially for people of color. That actually was part of the survey that we discussed last week. And that was a public response to that. And then finally, the last response in legislative efforts category, if I'm not mistaken, is the spate of laws being proposed that would take away the rights of transgender people is evidence that we are a long way from treating them right. Okay, that was the last response in that category. Next category, society is not open to change. The first response, too many people are simply stuck in the binary. We as a society need to just accept that someone else's gender identity is whatever they say it is, and it rarely has any bearing on the lives of others. Number 2, these are people. Who they say they are is all that matters. Society, mostly conservatives, doesn't understand change in any form. So they fight it, and they hinder the ability for others to learn about themselves and others, which slows growing as a society to a crawl. That's an interesting statement. Wouldn't you agree, Lillian?
Oh, yes.
Okay, 3. It's an issue that has been in the closet for centuries. We know this. It's time to acknowledge and accept that gender identity is a spectrum and not binary. Number 4, we are not accepting the changes. We refuse to see what is in front of us. We care too much about not changing the status quo as we know it. And then the last response to the question in society is not open to change category is that society often views this as a phrase or a period of uncertainty in their life. Instead, it's about a person bringing their gender identity in line with what they have experienced internally all their life. And then finally, this survey states, most, and this is the survey talking, most say they're not paying close attention to news about bills related to transgender people. They just don't even want to go there. So, they also tell us that many states are considering legislation related to people who are transgender, but a relatively small share of US adults, and that share actually is only 8%, say they're following news about these bills extremely or very closely. Another 24% say they're following this somewhat closely, while about 2/3 say they're following it either a little closely, and that's 23%, or not closely at all, and that's 44%. Or that it's bad that they haven't, and 51% say it's either neither good nor bad that their children have or haven't learned about this in school. So I find these responses to not only be very aligned with the facts that we presented in last week's episode, but they're eye-opening and fascinating to me. So Lillian, what's your response to what I just read that the general public feels about this transgender issue?
I think that considering we're not a country that aligns church and state, we seem to follow the dictates of religion very, very carefully. And that a lot of people are guided by what they learned in Sunday school and what has been reiterated by their parents through the generations. I strongly believe that if you come from a family where your parents are open-minded, what they call liberals, chances are you won't have a really strong opinion one way or another because you are not being threatened by the identity of who you may or may not be. For example, folks, in nature, there are many animals, fish included, which are some of them are mammals, that are both sexes, male and female. And while before they give birth, they're all male, but when they give birth, they are female. Look at the lovely seahorse, for example. They carry the eggs of the female, of which they are, inside their pouch. You don't see people getting upset about that. In fact, recently I saw, I'm not going to say a caricature, but they had 2 men who were pregnant because they were women, even though they were dressed as men, and obviously they did not have sex change in terms of their biological parts. it did not offend me. I think it'd be great if men had kids because it would give them an eye opener of all the pain that's involved in giving birth. I think they need to experience that firsthand. I also think that a lot of parents are afraid, again, the fear factor, that if their kids are exposed to other young people who have already declared their gender, that their kid will take it as a permission for them to act the same way. When I wrote my book, Teenagers, A Bewildered Parent's Guide, the number one question from fathers was, what will I do if my son tells me he wants to be a woman? And I said, are you going to stop loving him? No, he's my son. And I said, well, what are you afraid of then? He's the same person. His outward appearance is different, but he's still the same person who still needs your love and guidance to become successful for when he becomes an adult. And just because he's not turning out the way you think he should turn out doesn't mean he's not turning out the way you want him to turn out in the inside. And as long as the inside is in good working order, I don't think there's any problem here, sir, because that's what's important. Now, if be declaring your son is a homosexual, so it's going to make him a prevert, then we have a problem. Or if it's going to turn your daughter who wants to become a man into a serial killer, we have a problem. But if the problem is that they're happier being something that they weren't born to be, they're not a threat against society. The only threat is the fact that your preconceivedness of what they should look like and act like is a threat to you. And it's very difficult for humans to accept change.
Now, Lillian, I do want to say that, and this is my personal opinion, I'm going to share it with everybody, that I have a very difficult time wrapping my head around children who want to change their sexual identity. And part of the reason why, as we all know, psychologists tell us that children's personalities are not even developed until they're minimum 5 years of age. So at 5.5, and they come to their parents and they say, Mommy, I am in the wrong body. I want to be a boy, not a girl. But their personalities only were just recently developed. Do you think at 5.5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, these children are mature enough to make that kind of lifelong decision for themselves? This is what I take issue with. I don't think so. We know, and somebody said it in the responses, and it's absolutely true. I know this from being a certified dementia practitioner, that a young adult's brain is not fully developed until they're in their 20s. So how could a child at 5.5 years old determine a decision that will take them into their adulthood when their brain is not even fully developed yet and won't be for some time? So I don't know. My feelings about this is, I'm not saying that children shouldn't feel that they're not in the right bodies, but I think as far as any changes made, permanent changes, surgeries, I personally feel that they should wait until their brains are fully developed, they experience life more than they have at 5.5 or 6 years old, or even as a child or an adolescent. And then if they still feel that way into their adulthood, that would be a better time to make such a dramatic decision as to actually have your body parts change to match the gender that you feel you truly are. I don't know, Lillian, what do you think of that?
I think that I've known some kids who at 5, 6 years old acted more like girls or acted more like boys, even though they were the opposite sex.
Yeah.
And their parents did more damage to them psychologically than having their bodies changed. On the other hand, if our society could accept these kids to be whoever they want to be, and if they want to dress up as boys or dress up as girls, they should be allowed to. But our society does not operate like that.
You
And
talk about a train wreck waiting to happen. There's enough bullying going on in
yes,
schools as it is. And then to subject a kid who dresses the opposite of their birth
yes, it's
sex.
even worse. And yet, nobody seems to be upset with the idea that parents have the right to pick the hair color, to pick the eye color, to make sure that the kid is a genius or very smart, or make sure that the kid is going to be tall or short or thin. And a lot of parents want to have the right to do that. And what I'm thinking is that any worse than a kid at 5 making a decision about they're not happy with the body that they're born in? I don't know. I think it's just as bad to keep on inbreeding, which is what inbreeding does, or to have a Hitler like structure where you only get blonde hair, blue eyed kids to be born so that they're all powerful warriors. I think if you're going to play God and that's what you're doing, and nobody seems to get upset about that at all. But when a child comes along and says, I'm not happy, do you have the right to say you're much too young because your brain isn't developed yet for you to make a decision on how it's going to influence the rest of your life? Tell me, how many teens think about how drugs are going to change their brains when they're still in the development form? How
Well,
many
that's part of
teens
my point.
and how
They
many
don't think
teens
about
they
it.
don't think about? Same thing with alcohol, the same thing with syphilis or
And then when they're
VD.
mature enough, a lot of them regret it, but they
A
have to
lot
go
of them regret it,
through.
but by that time is too late.
Yes.
So I think that probably not now, maybe 100 years if we manage to get through 2023 without the atomic bomb being dropped. And trust me, that will mutate us a lot more than anything we're dealing with at the moment. But I really believe that if you really feel sincerely that you're born in the wrong body, that trying to change your body to match your mindset is probably, unless it's super critical, I would think that you would want to at least wait until the kid is 18. And by that, at 18, they're old enough to go to war, and that does rearrange your body permanently, whether you've fully developed your brain capacity or not. But I think that the normal everyday child coming out of a regular middle class family, they don't have the ability to go out and invest in an operation of that sort because insurance won't pay for it. So you're talking about the wealthy.
And then let's say they do change their mind later on after they've gone through all this and been subjected to the bullying and the criticism and all the other things that go with it. And then let's just say hypothetically that when they're more mature and have experienced more of life, they decided, oh my gosh, just like the drugs that
Well,
we
they
did.
have to keep on taking hormones. They had a transgender gentleman on Naked and Afraid. And I was very surprised. And it was a man who had taken the operation, and he was taking his whatever you need to take in order to keep his female features working. And when you're on Naked and Afraid, there's no place to put your prescription drugs to
Well, I know
be.
I'm being the
And
devil's
and
advocate.
he turned into a woman while he was on the show. And I bet they got good ratings, but you didn't hear anybody say, or I didn't read anything after her appearance on the show, that people were upset by it. So
Well, the
I
other
don't
thing
know.
I want to mention is that it's my understanding, I have been told this by many people, that in order for a doctor to agree to even do a sex change operation, they have to go through extensive psychological counseling to make sure they're going to be able to handle the change. How can a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old be psychologically prepared to handle a drastic change like that when they barely lived any life at that young age? That doesn't make any sense to me.
But I don't think there have been any operations on these kids. I haven't read of anything about a 5, 6, or a 7-year-old kid having a gender change because they wanted it. I really think that you're talking more about kids who are 14, 15, 16, a lot older. I think that it really, and I know a lot of gay ladies, for example, who are very content to stay the way they are, but they pursue what choices they make for who they want to date. I
But I
think,
don't think being gay and being transgender are synonymous. I think most people who are transgender, and this actually came up in that survey that we talked about last week, that most people who are transgender do not identify as being gay.
well,
They
that's
want to
because,
be, they want to be the opposite sex, but that doesn't mean it's because they're gay. It's because they just feel that they were born into the wrong body, that they
yes, but
really feel like they're male or female, but they have the opposite body.
I understand that, but they're still included within the gay
Yeah.
lesbian community because they are, even though they may want to become a male, they still, while they're waiting for their changes, date males. I mean, when you take a look at the homosexuals who dress up as in drag, right? Is drag just means you're transgender. You're
Yeah.
pretending to be something you're not, but you're still dating your sex. So if you're a woman who's trying to change into a man, you're still dating women. And there have been instances in history where these folks have gotten married and their partners have never guessed that they were transgender, which is, I don't know, mind boggling to me. But what can I say? I think that if you're a responsible parent, you're not going to allow your young child at 5 or 6 or 7 have an operation, because I agree that I don't think they're responsible. But on the other hand, by the time you're 18, there are certain choices that are open to you that you can go ahead and do. And I think that if that's what you want, that's fine. But I also think, like anything else, you have to be told everything that may or may not happen to you.
I think one of the most noticeable examples of what we're talking about is what you see in the news all the time about Shiloh Jolie Pitt, who at a younger age insisted that she was in the wrong body. And now she's in her late teens. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, she's changed her mind about that. She really does enjoy being a female versus the male that she claimed she felt she really was. Am I mistaken about that? I think that
No,
she has.
there have been several stars,
Yeah.
Hollywood stars, that have had gender changes.
Well, she
And
didn't have a change, but she changed her mind about it from being a young child, and then by the time she was in her late teens, has embraced being a female.
and she'll probably change her mind again, but there's some people who seem to know who they are and who they feel better as. And I'm not going to say, no, you're wrong, but at the same time, I think that if they're really, my feeling is, if it's something you really truly believe in, you'll wait.
Yeah, that's the point
And
that I'm trying to make here.
that's basically, but the United States citizens, hurry up. Instant gratification. I think
Yeah.
it's a gene in our system now, because a lot of kids tell you a lot of things. And because they're exposed a lot earlier to the commercial social media world than we ever were, that there are lots, they see the advantages of being male over female or female over male. And
Well,
they're,
I want to tell you, I have a 7-year-old granddaughter, and many times she tells me things, and I'll say to her mom, who's my daughter, oh, she told me this. And my daughter says, and you believed her? She's only 7 years old. They'll tell you anything.
yes and no. Some
Case
of
in
them,
point.
well, I don't know. I have a son and a grandson now. And my son told me a lot of things when he was 4 or 5 years old. And 40 years later, 45 years later, he's doing exactly what he would told me he was going to do when he was 4 years old. So I think you have to be careful. There, I would say it's a minority of kids who have a good sense about them. And then you have the rest who are normal. It's almost like I'm watching a movie now on Netflix called Fatima, about 3 kids, 7, 9, and 12, who said they see the Virgin Mary. And the adults, of course, think they're lying, or they're going to have them declare it insane because they don't believe it. And yet these kids are being punished for something they really believe that they said happened. So I think that it's the same thing. Not everybody's going to believe you. Not everybody's going to believe that you're making the right decision. But I think there's some kids just know. Is it right? I don't know. Do they have the right? I don't know. When you can give the fetus the right to live over the life of a mother in a Catholic hospital, let the mother die and take the fetus because it's a live human being. Let me tell you something. I have a lot of problems with that.
Well, my daughter at 6 years or 7 years old told me that when she grew up, she wanted to be a clown. She'll be 40 next month. Is she a clown? No, she's not a clown. She's a scientist.
Yeah. Well, when my kid was 4 years old, he was going to be an artist, astronaut, actor. And when he was in the high school for visual and performing arts, he majored in both acting and art. And when he got to Parsons, he was told he had to choose. So he chose art. Now he's world renowned. I just think it depends on the child.
Yeah, and he waited until he was more mature to make that decision and had lived his
Yes.
life
And lived his life. And I think you
to
need to
guide
give,
him to that decision.
but you have to give the kid the ability to do that. And we're
Yes,
not giving the kids the ability to do that. If they really feel like they'd be more comfortable in a boy's body, let them dress as a boy for the next 5 or 6 years. See whether or not this is something they really want. Or
yeah,
the
oh,
same thing with a boy.
I
Give
agree with
him the
you. Yeah,
space to
I
do
just think
that.
that that's about as far as it should go until they are more mature and have had more time um, to know whether or not that's really how they feel. But I'm not suggesting that we deny them the way they feel, just not make any dramatic changes until they grow up and decide whether or not they still feel that way. That's the only point I'm really trying to make here.
And I agree with you. I think that giving a 5-year-old the right to decide what's going to be right for them for the rest of their life is like giving the president of the United States the authority to hit the button to explode the bomb.
Well, let me make one more point about this, because Lillian, when you and I were growing up, and we're females,
Yeah.
some of us had a tendency, and I'm one of them because I had an older brother, to be a tomboy.
Yeah. I was a tomboy. My mother,
And
she was
I
in the fashion
preferred to
industry. She
play,
hated it. Yeah.
yeah, I preferred to play rough sports, baseball and basketball and football with my brother and his friends, and I was accepted. I could not participate in any of the leagues because girls weren't allowed to play a
Yeah.
little league and a thing, but they allowed me to play versus playing. Now I did have a younger sister, so I guess I was a hybrid, because when I was around my brother and his friends, I was tomboyish. And when I was around my sister, I played Barbies with her. And that was perfectly acceptable and perfectly okay. My parents never once said to me, Lisa, are you in the wrong body because you like to play football with your ruffian brother and his ruffian friends? Never once did they say that to me. Some girls were tomboys and some girls were what I used to call girly girls. And there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. So, if a girl feels like she's in the wrong body at 8, 9, 10 years old and prefers to play sports versus playing with Barbie dolls or American Girl dolls or whatever the latest fad is, I think that's perfectly okay. But that's part of the experience that will guide them to discover how they really feel about their gender identity later on.
Absolutely. I mean, people like to play dress up. I never
Mhm.
dressed up in my mother's shoes. I dressed up in my father's clothing. I was
And
always a toreador for Halloween.
a what?
Didn't occur a toreador bullfighter.
Oh, okay.
I got to stick sharp sticks into a bull and kill him. Come on. I loved watching war pictures, and I played cowboys and Indians, and I was always the nasty person who killed people. I enjoyed it. My mother wasn't too thrilled about it, but I really did not care. I didn't turn into a boy because that type of terminology and understanding. I mean, I didn't hear about gays until I was in my 30s because it wasn't anything that was brought up in our generation. Now, when my son came home and said, Mom, some boy hit on me, he knew exactly what he was saying. I said,
How
Well,
old?
oh, he explained to me what the boy wanted. I said, next time he tries that, punch him in the nose. That will.
Well, how old was he?
Ben, Ben was 10,
Oh my goodness.
and he had sandy hair and hazel eyes, and he was gorgeous. I mean, the police warned me to watch out for child trafficking in Houston, so he wouldn't be snatched. And he said, but I don't believe in fighting. I said, trust me, just kick him, you know where. He'll get the message because talking to him won't do anything. And Ben said, okay, Mom, if you say so. And he did, and the kid left him alone. And then when Ben got older, he used to mock the gays about, hello, that kind of stuff. But if they saw a movie like Zorro the Gay Blade, which was a satire about Zorro being homosexual versus being straight, you had to explain it. Now he got it. And maybe it was because he was in life drawing by the time he was 5 years old. Yes, he drew naked bodies, but in his mind's eye, he was drawing a body. He didn't see that other stuff.
Well, this has been an extraordinarily dynamic and interesting segment today. Are we continuing this
We're going
again
to continue this next week because we are having another person take a vacation day, but we will be next Friday at 3 p.m.
Yeah, we're going to get back on our regular schedule for next week. We don't want to confuse people, but
we don't want to confuse people. Yeah. However, we're going to leave you with a challenge. If you know what cisgender means, CISGENDER, I want you to call us up next week at 484-364-1032 and give us your definition.
I don't even know what it is. So can I call in?
Yeah, you can call in. I didn't know what it was in until I looked it up. Please don't look it up on Google. I want to see whether or not you are trendy with the new terminology that is now coming out with BGLT and normal people.
Now, since you're opening up the phone lines for our show next week, is it okay if people also call in and comment on anything that we have talked about last episode and today's episode, especially in response to the general public's responses to the Pew Research Center survey that was put out there and interviewed the general public? I would personally love to hear how all of you out there feel about this topic. It's really, yeah, I mean, there's no denying it's controversial, but we would love to hear your views on it as well. So is that okay with you, Lillian?
That's fine. And I'll tell you folks something, it's not going to go back into the closet. If anything, I'm curious to see what happens with artificial intelligence, whether or not we'll have gay, lesbian, transgender, artificial intelligence available to us in a Walmart nearby.
Gosh.
So we want to, before we go away and stray, Lisa will provide her email. So if you have any opinions or you have any questions, they will certainly be brought up next Friday at 3 p.m. Lisa?
Yeah, you can email me at my personal email, which is dementiawhisperer1, the number 1, at gmail.com. And I want to thank everybody for being here with us again today. We really look forward to sharing this information and the opinions and comments and the facts that we extensively research for you to bring you dynamic shows like this. So thanks again. Have a wonderful weekend. And we will see you next week, Friday at noon.
Same time.
At 3 o'clock. I'm sorry, not to confuse you. I'm on the West Coast, 3 o'clock Eastern time, noon Pacific time.
Yes. And if you're in England, that's 5 hours ahead of 3. And if your math is still working, that's 8 o'clock in the evening, because when we switch, they switch as well. You can reach Lillian Caldwell at pwrnetworkllc@gmail.com. You can see this all over again at youtube.com// PWR Network _PW Talk Radio, on Facebook.com / Passionate World Radio, on Twitter.com / PW Passionate World Radio, and at Instagram.com / PWTR. So we want to thank everyone for joining us today. We will join you again next Friday, 3 p.m. And check out the website at https:// PassionateWorldTalkRadio.com. Thanks again and have
Thank
a
you.
great weekend. Thank you.